A new poll finds that nearly 40% of Americans worry about paying the bills, quote, most or all of the time, which is even higher than the 2008 financial crisis. The poll from CNN, of all places, found that 39% of Americans worry about paying the bills most or all the time. That's up by a third since the worst days of Biden inflation, and it is higher than the 37% during the 2008 crisis when joblessness was running nearly 10%. The reason, of course, is inflation. Even CNN admits, quote, consumers are still trying to catch up to the price spikes of the last few years. Still trying to catch up is an understatement. The gap between nominal wages and inflation-adjusted wages since the pandemic is more like 20%. So it looks like you're making a lot more, but even accounting for official inflation, workers have lost thousands in income. Of course, if official inflation is a lie, which seems likely going by real-world prices from housing to restaurants and groceries, then workers have lost a lot more. To illustrate, official inflation since COVID is 21%. But fast food menu prices, which are a standard proxy in financial markets for true inflation, are up more than twice that. Housing costs have actually doubled since COVID between rising house prices and rising mortgage rates. If those real-world numbers are closer to true inflation, then workers have lost potentially thousands per month. So how are we above 2008 levels of distress when unemployment is under 5%? Easy, the inflation itself is pushing people to take on part-time jobs, and government statistics count part-time jobs the same as full-time jobs. So if you get laid off and take on a couple gigs, you bag groceries Monday and Tuesday, sweep driveways Wednesday and Thursday, drive for Uber on the weekends, you are a one-man job miracle. You lost one, you gained three. Indeed, CNN's poll found that 35% of Americans, 1 in 3, say they have to take on part-time work to make ends meet. This rises to 44% of blacks, 52% of Latinos, and nearly half of workers under age 45. So this explains why jobs are rising on paper, yet the actual number of Americans employed is plunging. It's down 600,000 in the past 8 months alone. It also explains why Americans are spending like double-digit unemployment is already here. The poll found more than two-thirds of Americans are cutting back on groceries. Nearly half are cutting back on driving to save gas, and 4 in 10 Americans are now using credit cards to pay for necessities like groceries and gas. As always, this is hitting the youngest hardest, with nearly 80% of millennials and Gen Z unable to afford everyday expenses. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. I mentioned last week that most Americans think a recession has already begun, even as official numbers on prices and jobs gaslight their way to November. That means a lot is riding on the next election. If media manages to haul Kamala over the line, we get Bidenomics double time all the way down. If, on the other hand, Trump pulls through, going by 2016, we could get out of recession a lot faster with a lot less pain. A new episode of the Roundup podcast just dropped on last week's flash crash, unemployment hitting recession levels, and $17.8 trillion in personal debt, along with an interview with Jeff Tucker of Brownstone Institute on the Weimar hyperinflation and what is next for today's fake inflation numbers. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.